What?
Detecting physical tremors. Diagnosis, advanced aging.
Shut up, you Naga spy! You must be here to attack Garuda again!
What?
Rodea the Sky Soldier. Wii version. Okay, sorry if I had to jump on you there, but there's a very important reason I'm specifying that. And that is, while this game was also released on the 3DS, that version was bad. And while this game was also released on the Wii U, that was actually a port of the 3DS version. And I'll let that sink in for a sec, but while this game isn't exactly a breadwinner, it was on my Game of the Year list for 2015 for a good reason. Just not the other versions. Like, at all. Okay, so the story is, you are Rodea, a robot knight guy trying to defend the Kingdom of Garuda. You have been transported to the Kingdom of Garuda, except now everything's different, and you've lost your memory. So how you recognize that everything is different, I'm not quite sure, but, you know, video games. Oh, and there's an evil empire that has risen from 1,000 years that you're supposed to stop. So the plot isn't exactly the most original concept ever, but what is interesting is the story behind the development of this game. So pull up a chair and let me tell you. Now this game was made by Yuji Naka. If you recognize that name, well, congratulations, you have played Sonic the Hedgehog at some point in your life. This game was completed 100% in 2011. However, it was not made available to the public. Well, technically it was never really mass-produced for the public ever, but it wasn't made available to the public until 2015, almost half a decade later. And I know what you're saying. How exactly did this game get made, completed 100%, and then not get released until like 5 years later? Well, here's where my baseless conjecture comes in, but this is how I figure it worked. So, Yuji Naka and his team completed the game in 2011. I would imagine they probably took it to a publisher who said, well, the Wii U has been announced, it's coming out very soon, no one's going to be buying Wii games anymore, the Wii is dead. So if we're going to publish this game, you have to make it for the new systems so that it will actually appeal to people. It was at this point that Yuji Naka and his team hung their heads, sighed, and said, alright, we'll do it. And then the publishers once again piped up and said, we have some creative tweaks we might suggest in order to appeal to a broader audience. And while this is all baseless conjecture on my part, that is a giant red flag. It also explains why this game wasn't released until like 5 years later, along with the 3DS and Wii U versions, and why both the 3DS and Wii U versions are almost completely different games. But I'll talk about that in a bit. Now, talking about the gameplay of Rodea the Sky Soldier is a little bit tricky because it's one of those things that I wouldn't say it creates its own genre, but it does like to try a bunch of different things and borrow things from others. So if I were to compare this to other games, I would sort of say that mechanically speaking, it's sort of a combination of Nights into Dreams and Sonic Adventure. For better or worse. And I mean that in the most genuine sense, because like Sonic Adventure, it still has that weird bug where if you try and follow a line of rings, instead of going super fast through them, you might hit them at a slightly off angle and ping off into a completely different time zone. Yeah, this game has a lot of the same problems Sonic Adventure actually had. But the game itself is a platformer, I guess? It's actually more of a arcadey platforming flying game like Nights into Dreams. The controls are relatively simple. You point your Wii remote at your TV, and wherever your Wii remote pointer is pointed, you can then hold B, and Rodea will, after about a second, walk to that spot, which is, yes, about as slow and awkward as it sounds. However, if you were to shake the Wii remote, or just press the button really fast, he'll fly to that point. Moreover, if you hold down the A button, he flies to that point really fast, and it's constituted as an attack. Why you needed an additional button combination to do that, instead of just making that the default flying mode, I'm not entirely certain. The core concept is simply to get to the end of the level. Occasionally you will be stopped by various enemies, or forced to collect a certain amount of things in a small area. But aside from these small little arena-y bits, it's a fairly straightforward get from point A to point B type of game. Your biggest advantage is your ability to fly, because not only does this allow you to get past terrain very quickly and get the jump on certain enemies, but this also allows you to collect various collectibles. It allows you to take a not necessarily planned route through the environment, but you can explore with it, although there is limitations on your flight. Essentially, while you can fly unlimited, in this version anyway, that's a difference between this and the other versions, there is a limited amount of distance you can fly. If your pointer is pointing too far away, you're just going to have to get closer and then try and fly there again. I'm sure I'm making this sound way too confusing, but it is relatively intuitive. That is until you realize that the controls for the pointer and where you're flying also control the camera, because the nunchuck is completely not implemented in this game. Not sure why in the 5 years this was sitting around completed, no one at any point raised their hand and asked why there couldn't be actual camera controls, but that's a thing, and that's honestly probably the worst thing about this game, especially considering when you need to actually modify where your camera's pointing, you have to point to the edge of your TV screen with your pointer, and then it's very, very slow and cumbersome. And really, that's another thing, is they just needed to tweak the sensitivity as all hell on the Wii Remote, because it's just slow and not very fun. Maybe it's better with a Wii Motion Plus. I'm not spending $50 on a peripheral just to check. Now, aside from getting to point A to point B, it's a very basic game. However, there are some power-ups, very reminiscent to Sonic. There are little point collectibles, which will allow you to unlock hidden areas, which gets you medals for collecting purposes. There's a shield, there's a speed booster power-up, which basically just means go hit a specific speed pad and suddenly you'll run really fast through shields, which seems a little unnecessary seeing as you can fly past a lot of them. So why that was a necessary power-up and why they didn't just create a sort of clever flying around environmental hazard puzzle, I'm not sure. Weirdly enough, there's also guns, because I don't know why, but Yuji Naka once again decided guns had to be added to wreck another character, just like, well, Shadow the Hedgehog was already wrecked at that point, but it made him worse, and it doesn't help Rodea's case. It does allow you to dispatch enemies relatively quickly, but the gun doesn't do a ton of damage, so that's sort of the trade-off. Control-wise, it feels pretty intuitive control-wise because it just shoots where you point, but in terms of overall gameplay, it just feels weird and out of place to add guns to this flying adventure. There's also a multi-lock function which allows you to target multiple enemies with your flying homing attack, which that's actually a really useful ability, but I kind of wonder why that wasn't just sort of a built-in ability. Maybe it would have made the game way too hard to pick up for new players or something. I don't know. Overall, well, Rodea has a ton of problems. When it does something right, such as just flying from island to island, hitting enemies, not being stopped to shoot things or have to spin the camera around or whatever, when it's not doing any of that, this game actually shines really well. It's a fun, fast-paced, platforming adventure game, and I absolutely adore that. Now, the overall presentation to Rodea the Sky Soldier is kind of a mixed bag. Visually, it's quite nice, it's bright, it's colorful, there's tons of contrast, and everything just looks pretty. I love the world this game sets up, I think it's beautiful. I love the characters, I think they're uniquely designed, the enemies are pretty cool too. The problem kinda comes in with the audio design, however, because while this game looks beautiful, the audio sort of falls flat. The music itself is okay, but it's not remotely memorable. That said, while you are playing, it is pretty catchy. The voice acting, on the other hand, well, it does what it needs to do. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Because the overall quality of the voice acting is really good, I just don't really like the voices. Like, it feels like they're trying to have overly exaggerated character voices to, I don't know, appeal to children or something. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's not something that appealed to me. So, I'll give the voices a pass, but I'm not wildly enthused about it. Now, if you want to get a copy of Rodea the Sky Soldier, it was made available on the Wii, it was made available on the 3DS, it was made available on the Wii U as a port of the 3DS game for reasons. And, well, honestly, they're not super expensive, but here's where I'm going to jump in with my whole why this is the version you want to play. As I said, they're kind of completely different. They've got the same level layouts, but there's a ton of different stuff about them. For one thing, there's like a fuel meter, which limits your ability to fly at any point. There's like a weird purchasing upgrade system that makes it feel a lot slower and a lot more of a slog, and it just doesn't look half as good because it's got like this darker, grainier look to it. And once again, this goes back to my completely baseless theory that those versions were basically designed by some marketing committee, and it kind of further proves my point because the original Wii version that was, according to the box, and I'm quoting here, experienced creator Yuji Naka's original vision, and to further that, Yuji Naka has reportedly said on Twitter, "This is the version you want to play, not any of the other stuff," makes me think that the others were completely designed by some marketing committee. It just feels like it's paint-by-numbers designed to appeal to the broadest demographic, I guess? And it's just not very good. And I can say that because I have the Wii U version. And this goes back to why it's a little bit tricky to get the Wii version. Remember how at the beginning I kind of said that the Wii version was never really officially published for the masses? Well, here's the deal. If you want the Wii version, you have to get it as a bonus that was included in first run prints of the Wii U version. So basically, and again, reading from the original Wii box art here, the original vision, if you want this game, you have to buy the crap version that even the creator admits was bad, and pay a stupid amount of money. At least at launch when this game was brand new. But again, being that this is an extra bonus thing that's only available in first run prints, that's the only way you're going to guarantee yourself a copy, is to have bought this day one, the most expensive version of a bad console port, of a handheld port, of a bad game that was actually a good game at one point. Yeah, I don't know either, but that's a thing that happened and it makes me sad. The nice thing is though, as you can tell by my actual quoting of the Wii box art is, if you buy the Wii U version, they do give you a reversible Wii cover for it, and the box art for the Wii version actually looks good. Unlike the Wii U version, it's a shame my box is bright blue, and it sticks out on my Wii shelf, but at least I got to play this version, unlike the others. And I know I'm dwelling on this, but it's a real shame that this version is basically relegated to this weird, obscure collector's item at this point. But going back to actually buying a copy, this game hasn't actually gone up in price all that much. Cheapest one on eBay I saw right now is like $30. And apparently, a packaged Wii U version that's still like day one sealed isn't much more expensive, which is good because I imagine eventually people are going to realize that while this game might not exactly be a breadwinner, it's still a weird collectible thing that will probably jump up in price for stupid reasons. But that said, if you want Rodea the Sky Soldier, get the Wii version, ignore the 3DS version, ignore the Wii U version, because they are just not considered good by, well, even the creator, and that says something. Overall, Rodea the Sky Soldier is not the most common game, and it's not the best game I've ever played. Even though it does remind me a little bit of one of my favorite games of all time, Nights into Dreams, it's nowhere near as good. It's nowhere near as good as the Wii version of Nights into Dreams, and that game was hardly a breadwinner either. But, as I said, this game is on my Game of the Year list for a reason, and that is, when it does something right, it does something really, really right. It doesn't always hit that note, hell, it doesn't often hit that note, but there's still something here that makes it worthwhile. It's a charming game with a bright, beautiful world, and honestly, I like Rodea the Sky Soldier. For all of its many, many problems, it's still a memorable experience. And it's just unfortunate that it's been relegated to this weird, obscure collector's bonus thing.